What is going on, Metaverse? Welcome to another episode of Gaming on the Block. It's Animositas, TSG, and it's Mona. Quick introduction for our guest today. We're joined by Murph, who's the Director of Events at Decentraland. Murph, great to have you with us on the first time on Gaming on the Block.
Hey, appreciate you guys having me.
We had a chance to chat a little bit beforehand. TSG, this is going to be completely lost on you, but for all of those in the U.S. That are a part of our audience, Murph is actually a legend, not just because of his role in Web3. He was on the TV show Legends of the Hidden Temple in the early 90s. And so anyone that watched Nickelodeon growing up...
I know what that is.
No way.
I know what that is.
You know what that is?
It's a bunch of kids trying to do like an obstacle course, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
man.
right.
Crazy. Yeah, I'm very much aware of what that is. Crazy.
Yeah, I was a green monkey.
That's
Nice.
hilarious.
Green monkeys are
I got
always
to
the best.
round two. The steps of knowledge took me out.
So the good news is that probably prepared you for your current role in a lot of different ways, right? Look, the steps of knowledge becoming a challenge as you try and move your way into Web3 is probably a good metaphor. Murph, tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you're doing on the Decentraland side.
Yeah, so Murph, I work, like you said, with Decentral Games. I am the Director of Events. So I run and produce all of the Metaverse events in Decentraland. So Decentral Games, we're based in Decentraland. We have around 1,000 land plots, have about 250 to 300 built out right now, 5 or 6 venues. Our main game is NFT gated ice poker. You can play in the Metaverse as your avatar in Decentraland or on a mobile version, which has been really cool. We have some other casino type games that you can come into these like extravagant builds and play with your friends. Around that, I bring in musicians. We have different community meetups. We've had comedy shows and all types of just kind of engaging experiences for people to come in and hang out in Decentraland. So I've been in Decentraland since beta in January 2020. I actually just started hanging out, just meeting people. I kept coming back. At the time, I was working for a large accounting firm, and it was my hobby. Found Web3 and NFTs and just totally fell down the rabbit hole. Hanging out enough, I met some people in the Decentral Games community and in the company, and started working in their Discord just as like a community manager. And then February 2021, jumped in full time, running all of their Metaverse events, doing some partnerships, just a lot of hats, especially Web3. Mm-hmm. But yeah, man, Decentraland's amazing. It's been a really cool experience, and just being able to be part of this team building, especially in this bear. I mean, we've been heads down, just crushing it on new product updates and just new offerings for everybody coming through our venues.
So Murph, tell us a little bit about some of the changes that you've seen in Decentraland, then being, I'm going to say, an OG basically since the beginning. Obviously, the project has undergone a lot of change. As you mentioned, building all the way through the last year and a half of bear market has been challenging for many projects, not just Decentraland. What do you see as those kind of key strategic changes that the project has evolved to over time?
So there's been a lot of optimization, since the beginning. As more people come in, you got to be able to handle those loads. It's getting better. There's a lot more capabilities with the SDK. The new SDK is going to be supporting being able to build, I believe, with Real Engine, as well as Unity and a couple other platforms. Just the progress has been pretty amazing. I almost forget where it was when there wasn't, you couldn't even hear footsteps. There was all these little details that weren't in there. And now like Metaverse Fashion Week is going on this week. And it's just, you have these massive brands and there's just tons of people everywhere. Just the people that have been attracted to the space in Decentraland and what they're building and the experiences that I didn't even realize would be possible in this type of environment, are coming to fruition. So that part's been really cool.
So Murph, that's really awesome. One of the key reasons that we wanted to have you on is the coincidence here with Decentraland Fashion Week. And many of our audience members are super excited about the intersection of gaming and Web3. You guys have a kind of a different take on it during this week that's going on. So tell us a little bit how fashion intersects with Web3 and where you guys see that going in the future.
Yeah, it's fashion and Web3, especially these immersive experiences like Decentraland, where you have your avatar, you're meeting people from around the world to, engage in these social experiences where you want to express yourself doing that. And being Web3, now the items are, you own them like you would a pair of real life pants. You know, nobody can turn them off or take them away. So it's, you know, and and hopefully, you know, be able to wear them in multiverses down the road. It's been really cool seeing these big names. I mean, we got Tommy Hilfiger, Dolce & Gabbana, DKNY, ton of big brands. I was never real high fashion. I enjoy to style it up, but it's been wild to see it. And then you get these designers that can kind of, you know, go wild. You're going to see a lot of things that you just can't because of physics do in, you know, in real life. And then, you know, attaching them to games like the Ice Poker, you know, we did a collab with Community DCL Baby Dolls, created these really nice like tuxedos with like the blossoms and, you know, really high-end designs where it also gives you access into playing Ice Poker. You know, some of these other fits will give you access to VIP areas, or so there's like a utility that's built into the clothing itself. So you can express yourself, you can kind of just flex, hang out, you know, do your thing. And then also some of them will give you, you know, access to these new experiences, things you wouldn't have been able to do without it. And then just some of these builds they have up, you know, there's games within them themselves. So that, you know, quests to earn free wearables or quests to get this and that. And it's been really interesting because people get super creative with, you know, how do you make, you know, like a shirt company into a game? So it's been cool to see.
Fashion and Web3 is going to be super interesting as we develop and like over time as well, and we do get more users in these like metaverses, in these digital spaces is what I'll say. Just because, again, from a brand point of view, from a company point of view, creating something digital is so much more cost efficient, right? Like one, there's no cost of production really, or mass cost of production. You just do it one time, design it, and it's good to go. So the ROI on that from a company point of view is incredibly high. Second, like you said, the creative side, it actually allows a lot more creative freedom for the creatives and the designers to do things that couldn't be done, that are kind of constrained by real world physics, right? Like maybe changing colors or things like you can really like stretch yourself as a creative. So they win there as well. And then you get the actual other side of the secondary market and then taking a cut on reselling and things like that. So you're always making pretty much perpetual revenue for all times doing it. So what's the interest that you're seeing? I would imagine that what we're seeing now is like the first couple of steps into it from these large brands, just because, again, like we don't have mass users just yet. It's still quite early in it. But once we're looking at billions of people into these digital spaces, I can imagine all of these companies, like you say, your D&G, Acne Studios, all of these, Supreme even, jumping like headfirst into this space because they understand from a business perspective, it just makes a lot of sense. But where are you seeing it right now? Is it kind of lining up with what they're saying, where it's just baby steps at the minute? Or are there some of these big companies that you're seeing jumping in right now, even at this point?
Yeah, I mean, you see, you know, there's a little difference between how committed some of these companies are. Like some go full blown, they'll buy up space, you know, they'll have more permanent presence. But really it's experimentation across the board. I feel like, you know, a lot of these big brands and with these large customer bases, they're looking for new ways to engage and learn about their customers and be able to market to them better. So this offers this whole, and I think a lot of that value prop is seen where like Boson is doing, where you have the Phygital, this new idea of the physical piece that also comes with a digital version. So you can wear, you know, the piece in real world, you can get the, you know, the item that you can wear around to the mall or whatever, including with that has this, it makes you part of a club. Now that you're in the Puma Club, you have this NFT, you can get to special events, you know, in certain cities, things like that. So you're seeing them kind of experiment with all these different parts of Web3 and see how their, you know, customers and fans and consumers react.
Yeah, I think one of the key points that's lost on a lot of folks in the space, if you're super into Web3 and you're very knowledgeable about what's going on, most people here, I think, tend to underestimate how long it will take for us to see actual mass adoption, and they overestimate how committed Web2 companies are as they're kind of dipping a very pinky toe into the water, so to speak. And they tend to give a lot of credence to, oh, there was this really positive statement that was made by such and such a project, or, oh, they're setting up a task force or a separate sub team. But really, this is no more than just general business operations for most of these brands that are global organizations. They do that for 50 different ideas every year. And this isn't really that different. But if you're in Web3, it feels like we have so much mass adoption that's coming because all of these big players are here. I think what we're mostly seeing, though, is just the first experimentation. And so, as you mentioned, all of these organizations recognize that the future of the world is virtual, but they have no idea what that's going to look like. And so they want to at least have a little bit of exposure to it in case things begin to go viral, to go more mainstream in a quicker timeline than they're ready for. What are those signs that you look for one of these big Web2 brands that you think is they're actually doing something sustainable and trying to actually build something new, as opposed to they just want to be here to be able to say that they have a brand presence in the space?
It really depends on more longevity. Like Absolute's a good example. They had an activation a while back, and you'll see them come back and do other types of events. And from what I understand, they may, they're still interested in the space. That's from like more of a larger brand. It really depends on the industry. People are coming in to build these experiences that offer longer term value, right? They offer longer term value for participants in Decentraland and their base brands. So buying land or leasing it out for a longer period of time and building out their experiences that is more than just find 3 items and you get a free wearable, and then it's it disappears in a week. Where some people that start putting in builds with their their advertising. Like Boson, they've built out this mall and they're bringing in different types of brands and trying out different ways to do these phygital or really selling items, not just clothing. You can buy different items buy the NFT in World, and then you can redeem that NFT for the real item. And so it's this experimentation.
You're a lot more experienced in this digital kind of fashion thing than myself and Annie are. I mean, both of us, even in real life, are not very.
But you don't.
Yeah, we're not very fashionable in general.
Don't let the shit for you.
Yeah, but the question is, maybe maybe you don't, but what are some of the red flags when you see a company coming in for like a cash grab? And obviously we're seeing a lot less of it now because the NFT hype is a lot less. But what do you see that really lets you know that these guys are here for the right reasons compared to they're trying to get in and out, get the cash and bounce? Is there something that you look for when you see these actions or these big players start to come into the space?
It's tough. It's really because a lot of people come in with this facade of good intentions, and they're really into the metaverse and Web3, and they want to be on the cutting edge, and then they don't hit numbers right away, or their plan doesn't pan out within a week or two. It gets real quiet. So a lot of it's, and again, because most of these people are very skilled marketers, so everybody feels great until it's an empty lot.
Yeah, I mean, it is understandable for them. Like the bottom line is the thing that they need to consider, right? So maybe it is good intentions. They just don't hit the mark, and they have to reassess. So yeah, understand.
Well, yeah, and like you said, it can be tough, really, depending on what your brand is too, and who your market is. But like last year, the Metaverse Fashion Week, it was the first one. It was kind of a test, and and this year you see it bigger and badder. So it's like people realize that there's some value in that. And then you'll see a lot of the larger names and things like that want to jump in for these larger festivals and these more focused types of events that have a higher probability of bringing in more new people instead of doing like their one-off in, the middle of a down season or something like that.
Yeah. So one of the big questions that I'm wondering is, we've already seen pretty major reductions in the number of users across all kind of platforms, whether you're looking at gaming or metaverse. What would you say to critics who believe a lot of the metaverses out there today don't have enough sort of lasting engagement that's built in to retain users? And how do you as a project on the Decentraland side make sure, okay, we've sold all these land plots, We've got companies that are building. Is there enough of a draw for people to want to exist and participate in our open world?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, especially this last year, everything's kind of gone down. And like you were saying earlier, actually, it's hard because you're so in it and everyone around you is like so passionate and everybody's doing the things. But, just seeing what the communities are building right now and just the overall attitudes and just how communities help each other and really kind of this synergy between collaborations and, assisting with whether it's skill sets or these land grants and things like that. It feels, real promising that there's a lot of building in the bears, everybody keeps saying. And I feel that at this pace and kind of the way we're going, by the time we get back into the bull, we're going to be in a really good place for everybody's, feeling good again. People are throwing money back into the space, has their attention again. The goal is to have a lot of the, the little bugs and, the optimizations and, making those user experiences, the subtleties that can make or break a platform, smoothed out for that next big rush.
That makes sense. And when we look at the projects that really have been able to capture and retain interest over the last few years, there's a handful that have really sustained. And one of those for sure is Yuga. As we look at what's going on in the sector, this was something that was super interesting recently. They just had their second trip. And we have a big advantage because you actually participated in it, Murph. So this was going to be one of our topics anyways, even if you hadn't been able to join us. So maybe for those in our audience that are not familiar, what did Yuga Labs do with this? Obviously it's part of their other side activities as they're building out their own game ecosystem. Tell us a little bit about that experience, what it was like, and we'll see. I've got a few questions for someone that just observed it from a third-hand standpoint.
So it was really fun. So we did the first trip last, I think it was summer, which, the gameplay was cool. It was more just kind of seeing if everybody could show up. And then we went through some tasks and kind of went through the thing. And then this time, really wasn't sure what to expect. There was, I believe, about 7,200 people in it at the same time. And you start off in I forget what they call it, Infinity, but basically you're the lobby. So you're all loading up. And then there's 4 teams. They broke everybody up into 4 teams. You could hear some voices. So the team captains, where the audio was playing for all the players. Once it was ready, they dropped you into this really gorgeous scene. And then they started the whole storyline. And basically, it was 4 teams led by 4 captains, streamers, influencers. There was 2 main rounds, and you were collecting these bulbs with your character, and then dropping them off at the collection point. And then it was which team could collect the most to reach the storyline goals. At first, it was seemed similar to the movement gameplay, but they really, they added the character changes were a little bit different. The emotes, being able to fly, they had some cool in-world items you could interact with. So, like boosts, and they had some power jump. They had hover, the big flows where you can fly up in it and then jump out and soar, and all these different just functions and navigation you couldn't do in the first one. So it was really exciting.
One of the big concerns that I would say I have in a super large scale world like that, where you've got, as you mentioned, several thousand players, I have the worry that it's going to feel like the player doesn't have enough agency because they're not really able to influence gameplay. And this is actually one of the challenges I think sometimes with EVE Online, which for me is kind of the best example I can think of. With a super large scale world, you've got thousands of players playing in a single instance, but each one of them, of course, only has a really small impact. One of the big questions I have for these super large scale games is, does the player feel important enough? Because for most people, when we play games, you want to feel like you're the protagonist in the story, and what you're doing is super meaningful. And I think, having grown up with World of Warcraft and lived through 40-person raids were a little bit too much, what we found was 20 person and 10 person raids actually gave the best sense of you're important. Each individual is really important to this kind of small squad or small team size. So I'm curious, did you feel like it was maybe more exciting because it was very new and there were a lot of people there? Is there enough replayability value and sustainability with 10,000 people all interacting at the same time?
From my understanding, really the purpose was, more of a load test. The other side's going to have much more options than this massive team gameplay. But yeah, I see what you're saying. And a lot of it was because everything was, and the performance was amazing, by the way. Like having everyone in there. I mean, I didn't have any lag. There was no issues with, crashing or any of that, which was fantastic. There was a bit where, I was hustling just because you have your own you have your own score. So I was, was competing against everyone else in that way. Like, I think the scores got into millions of points. But right at the end, I think, because I was actually on the blue team, which we were victorious, and I'm receiving some
Congratulations.
type of,
Yeah.
Thank you. The end score, I think, was within 2,000 points. We were in like a couple million. It was just like, so right at the end, and you're watching, and it's fun too, because like the way that your team captain, you could hear him, cheering you on and all this, and kind of coaching as you go. It was a really fun experience, I think, and it was new for everybody, which was cool.
Yeah, no,
I mean, honestly, it took me a couple minutes to figure out what the hell's going on. I was like, I went to like the drop off point because there's really cool frogs with like these bubbles on their back, and you guys saw from the gameplay. I remember walking over there. I'm like, is this where we get what we're supposed to get? Just standing there like, fuck, nothing's happening. And then and then I saw the first blob, and I was like, oh, here we go. And then figured out, found a good path and did all that. So I would play. I think that mode would be really, really fun to play again. But it'll be interesting to see, once the land, because you get to see a couple types, because they had, I guess, like the more jungle style land, and then right at the end was like the desert, more desolate type land. I have one plot, and it's like a swampy something. So I'm pretty stoked to see it finally in person, but very promising.
All right, so TSG, I want to come over to you for a second, get your take on it. So as someone who's working at Illuvium, you guys are also building out an overworld. What do you see as kind of the most important elements for replayability and for players to want to continue coming back from a gameplay perspective?
One of the biggest things is immersiveness. Like, can they actually get into this and feel like they're a part of something, right? A part of a world, a part of a community, a part of something that alive that's going on. Same thing that you said kind of with World of Warcraft, with the raids. You felt important in a group of 10, right? You felt like you were playing a part in something, achieving something. And even with what Murph is saying with the other side, I watched, what's his name? Bryson's stream. I don't know, was Bryson one of the captains? I'm not sure, but
yeah.
Yeah. So like watching him, again, I could see and I could feel it even from again, like someone watching in. I was like, oh man, this looks really, really fun. Like everyone's working together. You're egging each other on. You're like, again, you were saying the blue team won. I think Bryson was on the red team, and they almost had you guys. Like at the very end, they almost had you guys.
Dude.
And it was crazy to watch. It's like, oh man, this is something that you can get behind. So I think these type of worlds is going to need is something that you guys can work towards. And again, I'm realizing as I speak, other side and World of Warcraft, you work towards something, right? So it needs to be a world that actually looks beautiful, that feels beautiful, that feels like you're actually getting something out of, and something that you can spend time with your friends to do activities. We saw even with the Illuvium overworld, as much fun as it was, some of the most fun that we had in the game came from us doing challenges in Discord amongst each other. Who can jump the furthest? Like, how do we do this? Like, it had nothing to do with the actual gameplay at all, but it's just that fun kind of working together to figure out something to try challenge each other. As long as you have an abundance of that, I think people are going to want to keep coming back and testing themselves, getting better, having a reason to develop. You don't want to create a world where a player comes in, plays one time, feels like they've mastered it, and then what's the reason for them to come back? There's technically no reason. If there's not new content, if there's no new challenge, there's no reason for them to come back. New upgrades and polishes to the actual world itself, challenges or the opportunity for challenges and things like that. and community. You definitely need something where you can communicate, voice chat, or something like that to keep people engaged. Otherwise, you're not really setting yourself for success. I think those are the three major points that anyone building an overworld, or when I say overworld, like a metaverse world,
open world. Yeah.
an open world, really needs to consider. Without those things, I think, it's that they're letting themselves down for sure.
I mean, granted, it was a test and all that, but it was, I mean, finding a friend of mine in there was pretty much impossible. Like I was like messaging like, so where are you? And she's like, I'm over by this thing. And I'm like, there's like
a lot of those things.
Well, especially now everybody's characters are pretty much the same, just like slightly different colors, and you had a couple options. But so I'm like running around looking at like names of everybody's heads.
Yeah, that's why I say community is a massive thing, like something like that, right? Where again, either being able to link up in a party or a friends list where your friends have an outline or something around, like just small things like that. And yeah, granted, it was just a test, so I'm sure these things will be added later on. But that sense of community and that social aspect is super important, which is why we see Fortnite, Valorant. This is why we see people play games on streams. Like they can play a single player thing on screen, but they want to talk to their audience, right? Even that is a sense of community. You need that. I would say no one, but I think it's the number is growing. Shrinking. Yeah. The number is shrinking of players that just want to sit by themselves in a dark room without speaking to anyone, without doing anything. I don't think that's a growing number. I might be wrong, but I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, in Decentraland, actually, that's one of the areas they're really strong is the communities that have, because they've been around for, it's almost 3 years now. Even with some of the technical issues you may run into, because these worlds are pretty heavy on your GPU and kind of require a decent computer to have the ultimate experience. But there's Web3 is very tolerant to start with troubleshooting and things, which is great. We're all kind of in this new space, but once you get into Decentraland, and I've heard it from over and over, they'll like meet a group. There's there's a few, and they'll meet the one that they kind of click with, and they're like, oh, I just I had to come back, and I love when they do this or when they have these special things going on, and I brought my other friends from school here and things like so. Right to that community aspect of it, it's critical.
100%. Like I remember, like you just even saying that reminds me of like back in the day when I was in high school, which is like over a decade ago. But again, on games like Dota, right? You would just meet different people that your friends had, and then you just start talking to them in game, and then they become your friends. And then when the original friends out there, you'd be playing just with them, and it's like again, it's that snowball effect of community. And I think that's going to be super, super important moving forward, especially once you can start moving around, like you say, dressing up, showing who you are with fashion and everything. I think like social, like community and fashion are very closely linked. And I think over time, it's going to really, really show itself. You see it already in Fortnite with like Spider-Man skins, Dragon Ball Z skins, like that's a way to show the stuff that you're into.
Yeah, and you see that all the time in Decentraland. like one group, Last Slice, is a community, and they have this like pizza outfit warrior, and then the baby dolls. There's another community, and the girls have these like it's very pink and has a certain look. So each of these, there's the bears, and it's just funny, man. And it's part of that look and feel. And you may not wear it all the time, but like special events, or you have an accessory or something that like you would in IRL. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I think the sense of community is really a critical part for replayability. One of the topics that I always like to remind people of is there's a difference between replayability and repeatability. And oftentimes people sort of equate the two, and they assume, especially if you've never been like deep into game design or even just deep into a game for years, you sort of assume, well, as long as you can do the same thing and it's fun, you're going to do it over and over again. Like that's replayability value. That's a repeatability value, which is not proven. If we look at like the overall retention numbers for a lot of like MMORPGs over the last couple of decades, just being able to do basically the same thing over and over again doesn't have much appeal to gamers. That whole point of grinding to just do the same thing and is pretty proven to not be successful in the long run. And in kind of as you mentioned, Murph, something that's super novel and innovative the very first time, people are willing to do it for a while, right? But if you can get that same experience elsewhere, it's not so interesting anymore. And so I think the games and the entertainment that's going to really have people that stay, they've got to have this replayability value, which means it might be the same core gameplay loop or mechanic that you're engaging with, but it has to feel different enough each time in whatever ways that is, right? Whether it's you've got enough RNG components that make it feel separate, or you've got events that it might be the same core mechanic, but the skin is very different and it feels like it, or you've got this interaction with other people in your community, in a party or a group or guild or whatever, that adds that variability to where it's always a different experience every time you come back. Otherwise, you're going to get bored a lot quicker. And so I think that's the big question: is these projects, whether it's sort of an internal game mechanic in an open world, or it's the individual game itself that we're talking about, you have to look for those that have clear understanding of what actually adds to replayability value in a game. And usually that's going to come back to some of those good first principles in game design.
I've just thought about this as well, and if you'd ask Andrew Wall, the host and executive producer at Illuvian, the same question, I just realized what he would say. For actual replay, because I might have conflated the two with repeatability and replayability. And if you would ask Andrew, I think what he would have said, and I agree completely, is some form of PvP. So some kind of player versus player component, some kind of customization or modding or something like that actually allows user-created content, some form of role-playing, which again we see in Decentraland or something like that, where you can play as a bartender, a dealer, right? You've got these different roles. Consistent updates. You need consistent updates, right? So if you can have those four things, that is always going to have people coming back to you. And if you look at that, the two biggest names that have all four of these, GTA 5 or GTA in general, there is a reason that it's still being played today, because it's got all four of those things. Minecraft, the same thing, all four of those things. So in regards to replayability, if a game can knock out all four of those things, you've got a really, really good chance of success. Three of those things, it's like, it's doable, but maybe not as much replayability. But if you can get all four of those things, PvP, user-created content, role-playing, and unlimited updates or consistent updates, you're on the right path for sure. So I just channeled a bit of Andrew Wall there, but I know that's exactly what he would have said.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it's like when Fortnite cracked like the season pass thing, and it was like you can create new seasons, new themes, new like forever. And then it's it's new money in, new players in. You're playing to different likes, and I remember when I first realized like how that all worked, I was like, that's amazing.
Yeah, and now they've got the Unreal editor, right, where users can create things. So now they've got the other one, which is like, damn, they really on top of it now.
Yeah, for sure. I had an interesting discussion just this week with a founder of a project, and he likened one of the mechanics that he had in game to like the Path of Exile map system. So probably not that many of our audience members have played PoE, but in general, every item you find in game, it has a currency value, but it also has a utility. And so you might find a scroll that lets you identify another item. You can turn that scroll into any other type of object that is itself a currency that you could then use to sell or trade in most game modes with other players as well, and upgrade. But it's the same way with content. So you get map items that you can then customize and build. They themselves are a form of currency, but they're also a form of replayability, and almost like it's randomized content. It's not pure user-generated content, but to your point, TSG, it's a really key element of that consistent updates that you can always kind of build and mod your own maps as you go in and play. One of the topics is we think about projects like Other Side, projects like Illuvium, Decentraland, as we're seeing them continue building. This sense of community is super critical for all of them, and having a player base that's there, that's loyal, that's interested to be participating in what's happening, really the only way they're going to have a chance of succeeding. one of the most common ways that we see this pursued in Web3 is just by giving them stuff. Frankly, a lot of projects, the entire approach is we're just going to keep giving you free stuff. We're going to airdrop you an airdrop that lets you get another airdrop that lets you get a whitelist to get another airdrop. And at the end of the day, I think it's really good for keeping people around. I'm not so convinced that that's a good way for building a community, but I want to get your guys' take on it. What are the pros and cons of using the free stuff model in Web3 for building a player base? Murph, we'll go over to you first.
Sure. So definitely see, like you're saying, the value, it gets people's attention, brings people in. It can incentivize to get people to try something they wouldn't have tried before. Like for Decentral Games, we'll airdrop free ones and we'll do partnerships and things like that so that can introduce people that before would have no idea that that wasn't even a thing. It gets you into the game system, allows you to, fit in, kind of feel like you're part of the group and these types of things, whether it's wearables or, an NFT being part of the, an NFT project. It does wear off, right? So if you're just constantly getting free things, and it's that balance of stuff versus having value. I have all of these items and NFTs. Like when I get it, it's like cool. Sometimes, even have you ever got an airdrop and you're like annoyed with it? like, oh, I don't even want that on my wallet right now. Like,
where's my hidden tab? Yeah,
yeah. No, and I'm scared to touch it. So I was like, put that in the hide initially in a way to pull people in and kind of help show what you're doing, or some things you need to have more than a couple people for it to be enjoyable. So that's it's another approach to that. But I think there has to be a longer term game plan. And if you can, introduce people into these new ecosystems with some freebies, provide some like low cost but high value once you're in. So so I feel like if I pay for something, I'm more likely to care about it, just because it's like I'm invested now. So bought it in the first place, so I must have some kind of care, or but I do have free stuff that I wouldn't let go of for most things. So it's just finding that balance and kind of what people find value in.
Yeah, TSG, what do you think? What are those key value propositions if you were to advise someone, or as you talk with Illuvium about marketing? People love getting free stuff, right? So what's the right balance?
Regarding content creation, if you were just doing giveaways and that's all the audience was there for, just extracting everything from you, you're not really building a brand at all. And what I advise a lot of content creators and people building brands is it's difficult, but take the slow road, because it's the consistent road. It's more building it brick by brick and making sure that it's stable. Your foundation is strong, rather than trying to go super tall, super quickly in a very flimsy manner. I get the purpose of it. Done once in a while for very specific reasons makes sense. But if that's your kind of go-to, if that's the thing, what do we do, guys? You go into your back pocket and the only thing you pull out is giveaways. Like, let's give things away. You're not, get a better marketing team. It's just not sustainable at all. I don't think that's the right way to actually build a brand.
Let me ask the question. Hasn't that been Yuga's entire business model for the last 2+ years? It would be difficult for someone to argue that there's been a more successful Web3 brand over the last 2 years. Their entire structure has been basically based off just keep giving away stuff that people perceive as highly valuable, and they'll stick around, and you've seen a community form around that. Are we saying that that's just unsustainable, or am I oversimplifying their business model?
I think you're oversimplifying it just a little bit. I think there are other variables in play with in terms of culture. Like they've done that, but they've also really tapped into culture, pop culture, and celebrity culture. And we know that a vast majority of society, and I think it's a majority, really looks up to celebrities. They want to be like them. They're highly influenced by them. That's kind of what influencer marketing is, right? That's the whole thing. So getting someone like Snoop Dogg, like Eminem, once you get people like that on board and people that are diehard followers of people like that, the ship kind of drives or steers itself, right? I think at that point, they've leveraged something else entirely, not just the giveaways. And it's people wanting to be like, yo, Justin Bieber has that. I want to be like that. It's the same thing with like Louis Vuitton, Gucci, like from what I see. And again, I live right next to a luxury mall. And when I go there, I know what I'm looking at. Most of the time, it's not rich people buying those products. It's average people wanting to look rich. And I think that's kind of the same thing. That's the model that I think that Yuga's actually playing with right now. They've leveraged the giveaways into this, where it's, again, the average consumer, the average person that comes into NFTs knows what a base is. Why? Because of all these people that have it, all of this reputation that it has. And I don't think, if you ask the average NFT person or even a non-NFT person, how do you know Basie? It's not, oh, they give away stuff. It's Snoop Dogg has one. It's Paris Hilton has one. And I think that's what they're relying on now. It's not the giveaways. If you ask the average person or even someone in NFTs, they're probably not going to say the value of Basie is the giveaways. I think it's the other things. It's the exclusive club. It's that exclusivity that comes with the influencer marketing that I think they've done. Again, I might be wrong. I don't think I am, but yeah, I'd love to hear your takes on it.
Yeah, Murph, what do you think?
Yeah, and what's interesting about the Web3 is you have that piece where they own the NFT, they're part of this group, and with blockchain NFTs, immutable membership, it's like now I'm in the same community as Snoop Dogg. So it's like,
exactly.
It's not even like I look like him, or, it's like I'm like legit, like I'm an owner with him. I'm in the same Discords, whatever the case is.
It's like a random kid in India could be like, yeah, man, I'm in the group is Snoop. Like, I think that holds way more value than I get free shit. But sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, no, totally. Well, yeah, I mean, like Steve Aokiverse, he's got this big project, and I thought it was really cool what he was doing. So I jumped into it early. And the way they do it, it's super legit. I mean, you get into the Discord, like Steve Aoki's in the chats. He responded to something I wrote once. It's just, so it's if you use it to give special access, like you're saying, or if it's being used in these new kind of ways that Web3 has unlocked to consumers with mutable memberships, utility, kind of makes you feel special outside of the norm, I guess. The freebies are fun, but I think it's those other pieces of it that really bring the value and get people to spend money on some of these projects.
It's exclusivity that people want. Like, that's what people actually want. Something exclusive and access. Like you say, if you have access to Steve Aoki, if you have access to Snoop Dogg.
Exclusivity and inclusivity. Huh?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. If you can get those, like, that's what people want. Like, get freebies and stuff. It's like, oh yeah, cool, it's nice, but it's not community building. But exclusivity and inclusivity, access, that's what actually builds a community, in my opinion.
That's one of the community markers that I think we've seen is true over and over again. And for instance, with ETH Lizards, one of the main selling points that we have is the number of founders and builders that are across all of Web3 gaming that are part of the community. In many cases, actually very active parts of the community is a super positive and important part of holding an ETH Lizard, right? There's other parts to it, but just being a part of that group matters a lot. And it's funny you mentioned Steve Murphy. Steve Aoki is actually an ETH Lizard as well. He's got his own custom ETH Lizard. So nice. Getting access to communities of folks that you are influencers or are builders that you look up to, I think is one of the most fun parts of being in this industry so early, because it's so small that you actually have a chance to actually interact with these folks, as opposed to just maybe having kind of the I was there stamp with with so and so 50 million other people, right? I was there when there was only 5,000 people in such and such a project with these 10 people that were that are amazing and I highly value and respect. So I think that's one of the most interesting parts right now. I wonder if that's going to dramatically change as more and more folks come into the sector, if it loses some of that kind of specialness, because you're now not one of 1,000 or 5,000 people in the same community. You're one of 5 million people, and maybe it's not as valuable at that point.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how, because it's inevitable. You're not going to feel special if there's 10 million people in the Discord chat. So it's like, when we get to that point, it'll just have to be a different approach. This kind of gets limited because everything's 10,000 this or 20,000. So it kind of guarantees it keeps it at that. So once these larger projects start growing out, it'll be interesting to see how that's handled.
I actually don't think it'll matter at all. Like it'll obviously have an effect, but I don't think it's going to. Again, if you're a Boston Celtics fan and you see someone wearing a Boston Celtics jersey down the road, you know there are millions of fans, but you still have this connection with them. It's still that sense of community. It might not be as intimate, but who knows, man? If you see someone and you dap them up, that could be an intimate moment, right? So I think as long as you've got that bond over that IP or that brand, I think.
Yeah, maybe more in regards to like access, like. It's going to be a lot less likely you're getting Steve, replying, or, now like you're saying, like you join this group, now you have access to these brilliant developers and really smart contract, or whatever it may be. As it grows in space, it's going to be just harder to get that type of access. With the growth, that's actually a benefit. I mean, if I'm walking down the street and I love Pokemon, so you do like Pikachu shirt, but like, I go with my kids all the time. Shit's awesome.
Exactly. So yeah, like it's one of those things where if you want like massive growth, you're gonna have to sacrifice a little bit of the accessibility of the access that you get, and it really depends. It really depends on what you value. But obviously, for most of these things, they do want like insane growth in the long run. So it comes with the territory, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a good note to end on, because again, as we're here, we do expect the sector to continue to grow dramatically, and really all of the projects that we're working on, whether it's Illuvium, Decentraland, ETH Lizards, I think have proven that they've been able to withstand the test of the last few years, challenging market situations, and come out with still highly engaged communities, which is a good sign. So with that said, Murph, I really want to thank you for joining us today. For all of our guests, apologies that Mona wasn't able to make it. I know she really wanted to be here. She is heavily involved as we speak with the Colonize Mars project that she joined. So for those of you that have not seen, this is not actually her colonizing Mars in the real world, but it is a Web3 project that she's supporting. So sending our love out to Mona. We'll see her next episode of Gaming on the Block. Murph, we'll give you a couple more seconds for last thoughts on your side before we'll wrap up.
Oh yeah, no, this was a lot of fun, guys. Really appreciate you having me on, and it's really going to be exciting to see where all this stuff goes and see what happens the next couple of years. Appreciate it.
TSG, man, appreciate you as always, buddy. And
always.
For the rest of our audience, we look forward to catching you in the next episode of ETH Lizards Gaming on the Block.